You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, Mr. Bob Harris and Mr. Kyle Dvorchak. Gentlemen, it is Super Bowl week. And we have the Chiefs and the 49ers. I cannot believe it's a Super Bowl. In the season, it's like clockwork. Every year we anticipate. There's a lot of chatter in the off season, and then it comes and it's gone. The season's just gone after Sunday. Mr. Harris, what is going on in Albuquerque?
Oh, all kinds of fun stuff. And you mentioned it. There's a lot of chatter going on. We're not going to get into all of it. We'll get into some of it here. Justin would like to get into all of it, but it is so copious because this is a year I am not on Radio Row. Most years I am. And what you see on Radio Row, and hello, Kyle. Nice to have you on board too, Kyle Dvorchak, and Justin. But what happens on Radio Row is there are 10,000 radio shows. And there are 10,000 people walking around from one radio show to the next. Right. They're not there to tell you anything. They're there to sell you something. They all work for Old Spice or, a jewelry store or whoever. And so they go around and they say things, and they're asked the same question over and over. And so you're seeing a lot of that. If you go to the Football Diehards website and go to the news and views section, you'll see all that gossip. It's all there. There was some actual news today, though. Greg Olsen has moved on, and the Panthers have mutually decided to part ways. It sounds like he is not closing the door on returning for another team next year. Twitter would love for it to be the Bears. Fox Television would also love for him to come work for them. So he does have some options. Been playing a very long time. Great career. Maybe nearing the end of that road, though. So we'll see what happens with him. And also, I don't want to put too much on it, but it is going to cause some problems, right? Kareem Hunt was pulled over. Kyle, you want to run us through that story and what happened since it's in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to see where it's going to go. He was pulled over, I believe, with marijuana in the car. Cop says, he talks about, knowing very specifically Kareem Hunt's, NFL legal type of situation. And he talks about being a Browns fan at one point. The police chief comes out and defends him. Long story short, nothing legally happens to Kareem Hunt. So I don't, he didn't get arrested. Unless he gets tested by the NFL for marijuana, I don't think anything's going to happen. I believe he's a restricted free agent right now.
He'll be a totally unrestricted free agent.
Free agent. Yeah.
So he's free to sign with anyone. I will say though, I would be shocked if the league has not already tested him. Part of that videotape, he admitted he could not pass the test if they gave him one that moment. And if he did fail, look, I mean, I think maybe this is a thing where they wait for the new collective bargaining agreement, which is near, and that's some interesting news there. Sounds like they'll have a deal done pretty soon. Whether that includes more games or not, we'll see. But I'm going to go way out on a limb here and say the marijuana rules of the new CBA will be considerably more lax than the current rules. Because I think, number one, they probably should be. And number two, I don't think the players are going to put up with a lot of this, intense discipline for the weed, because they all smoke the weed, right? So, so I think we're going to see. So maybe this depends on maybe they can wait for that. I do feel like if they don't, or if the rules remain unchanged, this is going to cost him a little bit. I mean, they're going to give him some time. He's coming off a pretty serious suspension for as Justin Lonero's Twitter feed reminds us, he was not suspended for no reason. It was a pretty egregious assault on a young woman. So, and he served that suspension, came back, and put himself in a really good position to make some money, and now he's put that to some degree at risk. And so I do think that is interesting and worth watching. And by the way, there's as we roll through the tons of gossip and news. There was a little bit of news in Cleveland as well. The Browns hired an offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, the quarterback coach of the Bengals. They poached him. So I guess he will, we'll see if he calls plays or not. Joe Burrows is going to enjoy that offense either way, I'm thinking. So there's that. Kevin Stefanski likely to call the plays there, it seems like. But beyond that, I mean, there's so much of the, Marshall Faulk thinks that Christian McCaffrey is a better version of him. A lot of that news going on. I would advise you again to go to the website and check that out. In terms of Super Bowl news, the injury report for the Chiefs is in really good shape. It's basically Travis Kelce. Everyone is healthy. Everyone's working at full. Travis Kelce still on the list. Chris Jones still on the list, but they're going to play, of course. The more interesting thing is the 49ers injury report. In particular, Kevin Coleman, when we last saw him, he was separating his shoulder and riding into the locker room on a cart as Raheem Mostert took over and ran for 220 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Packers. So be pretty interesting to see. It sounds like Kyle Shanahan is saying, we're recording this Thursday. Kyle Shanahan is telling us that everybody is going to play. That includes Dee Ford, Kwame Alexander, everyone on the injury report, including Kevin Coleman. I think that's going to make this interesting when we get into the running backs on this week's slates. Kyle, run us through the rules here this week. We've got the captains, we've got all kinds of fun stuff going on. It's like basically a slate, a lineup of flexes, correct?
Yeah, lineup of flexes. Captain scores 1.5 times your normal points. And on DraftKings will cost you an extra 1.5 times their salary to roster. DraftKings gives you 5 flex, 1 captain. FanDuel gives you 4 flex, 1 MVP, which is the exact same thing, except it doesn't cost you any extra dollar multiplier. On FanDuel, because of how much smaller the player pool, or I guess your roster is, and I guess also scoring is slightly muted because of it's only half PPR, and no bonuses either, if that makes a huge difference. I find it really difficult to make unique lineups, which is kind of the most, it's really one of the biggest factors any top player will tell you, top Showdown player will tell you. Just finding lineups that are either not duplicated or just the fewest duplicates of a lineup are so important, because you will get literally hundreds of people on the same lineup. I think DK's biggest contest is 400,000 some people. Taking down first, if it's duped, a few hundred times, is not going to mean nearly as much. Your ROI, even if it's a better fantasy point projected lineup, your expected ROI is just not going to be that good, because you can project to split first place with so many people. So the more times you incorporate people taking part of that pot, you are losing a ton of equity. So I would say it's really crucial to just look for ways to get different, kind of regardless of if you think it makes it a better or worse lineup.
Have your girlfriend fill out 150 lineups. That'll help. Okay. And then when you win, you won't get paid.
Yeah, that's how it works. So I'm going to throw out, and I think we're going to, I'm going to throw each of you guys a bone at each position, let you chew on that bone. And we'll start out with Justin Lonero. And that bone is the bone he's loved since the day it showed up. Patrick Mahomes, the guy, Justin Lonero. Oh, wait. Justin Lonero was not initially sold on, not to the degree Kyle and I were.
I just didn't. There was some skepticism.
You've come around. Look, it's understandable. A lot of hype surrounding some of these guys. In this case, this week, Patrick Mahomes, 16,000 on DraftKings, 12,600, I think, on FanDuel. On DraftKings, 12,600, and 18,900 if you want to play him in the captain, put him in the captain seat. Look, I think he's a guy that's going to be pretty much on everyone's lineup. So make the case for and against, or whichever one you prefer, if you like both.
Yeah, I'm looking at 20 optimal lineups right now, vanilla optimal lineups, which are baseline projections, and currently he's in one of them, and he's not in the captain spot. So you don't necessarily need to have him in the captain spot, but what he did against the Houston Texans was amazing. That comeback, and in fact, I was talking to a friend from Vegas tonight, and we were talking about, what's going on with the Tampa Bay Bucks. He's a big Bucks guy. I said, there's just something about Patrick Mahomes that is different than something we've ever seen before. He just has it. He's got that moxie. I know I've also used that word with Baker Mayfield. Not quite the same quarterback. So Patrick Mahomes is certainly in play, and obviously because of his upside, he's not a necessity in the captain slot. Seen a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo in the captain slot, a lot more affordable, and but he's got to probably throw the ball more than 8 times to be of any relevance. And I think that they're going to want to throw the ball, or he's going to probably need to throw the ball more to keep up with Patrick Mahomes. So Jimmy Garoppolo is, he said, this is a kid that wants to win. Now, if he throws the ball 8 times every game and they win, seems like the type of guy that's going to be happy with that. They are going to run the football a ton, but again, the script, I would assume, aligns up with what Patrick Mahomes does. And if Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, then Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have to throw the ball more than 8 times. So they're both in play. Chances are you're going to have both of them in your lineups. I cannot envision this being a 17-10 type of game. It could be a shootout, and I think it's going to be a real good one.
Kyle, Justin makes a good point. I think he's 27 attempts in the postseason so far. The 49ers obviously want to run. We can look at, Patrick Mahomes' numbers. They've been phenomenal. He's thrown 4 touchdowns a game. He's a capable rusher. So
he's been okay.
Is the only argument for Garoppolo the pricing, or is Justin right? Do you want to get both these guys in your lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of, in my mind, the way I think of this game is, the way I think anybody should think of this game, especially if you're not playing 150 lineups, is, play it out in your head how you think it should play. If you think it is, Vegas, this line opened at 51, the game total, and then shot up to, at some books, 55 and a half. I'm looking at my book at 54 and a half. So, there is supposed to be a ton of scoring, and there is supposed to be a slightly Chiefs favored. So, in my opinion, that leads itself to a lot of essentially both passing games with a heavy slant towards the 49ers being undervalued, just because it was like we saw with the Titans coming into last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, but last game. I think Ryan Tannehill in that game, and he didn't attempt a ton of passes. I think it was 30 on the dot. He still attempted more passes than his past 2 games combined, because when you're not challenged and you have a solid run game and a solid defense, as a quarterback, you don't have to throw. So I think if this game plays out like Vegas expects it to pay out, yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo for the flex at 8K is a very screaming value. And same with a guy like George Kittle. I would tend to lean towards looking at, if you want to get different and play guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle, because I think everybody kind of knows that they're undervalued, I would be looking to go with a San Francisco onslaught, like Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle. I tend to lean Deebo Samuel, but I'm sure there's an argument for Emmanuel Sanders. And maybe, I'm sure this would be very unique than adding a guy like Kyle Juszczyk or something. So I think you have to play out specific scenarios to get Jimmy Garoppolo into your lineups. And I probably wouldn't be playing him at flex, because I think if he goes off, it is almost essential that George Kittle, for instance, goes off. And at tight end scoring, or I guess any sort of receiving scoring, is just going to favor George Kittle more. So I probably wouldn't really have any Jimmy in the captain spot, but I wouldn't mind playing a lot of him in the flex.
So, and I kind of agree with that, and we'll talk about Deebo Samuel, the wide receivers, here in a few minutes. But I do think that Samuel will be a factor, and I think he's a nice playmaker. But I guess if we're looking at, and I think you make the point here, Kyle, if you're going to play a tight end, Justin, let me ask you, is it almost essential that you pair him up with his tight end?
I would say so.
Whatever quarterback you're playing? Yeah.
I would say so. I mean, if you're Jimmy Garoppolo, I think your proverbial safety blanket is George Kittle. I mean, PFF had George Kittle as the number 1 offensive player graded this year. That's pretty impressive. I mean, some people throw that out the window, but I mean, he's the real deal. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't know that he can make all the NFL throws at this point in time. Still think there's a learning curve. George Kittle's my guy. You're getting a discount off of Travis Kelce with him, $1,800. So I tend to lean George Kittle. I think there's less offensive weaponry on the 49ers than there is the Kansas City Chiefs. So I certainly like George Kittle will be a big part of the game plan. I read something today where he was bullied in college, and there's a little revenge narrative with George Kittle. Has been quiet since week 17 against Seattle. Hasn't needed to do much. Again, there's a team game. There's still been successful. So it's going to be Kittle. And I would now, as far as Patrick Mahomes goes, do you need to pair him up with Travis Kelce? I don't know. You're obviously going to have to, there's going to be a decision you're going to have to make. And I think that decision is going to have to be Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce.
Right.
I'm seeing more Tyreek Hill currently than I am Travis Kelce in optimal lineups.
Right. If you look at some of the deep passing numbers, Mahomes has been very efficient as a deep ball thrower. You would think that the weakness of the 49ers, if they can keep the pass rush off Mahomes, if the Chiefs can do that, is the deep ball to Tyreek Hill. So there's something to be said there. Let's look at the running backs. Kyle, look, Raheem Mostert, coming off a huge game, and it's not unreasonable to chase those points. You're not going to get them. Not going to get the 4 touchdowns, probably not. But Damian Williams' role has been pretty consistent since he came back from injury. I think since week 16, scoring touchdowns on the regular, has a major role as a rusher and receiver. We're not seeing hardly anything from LaShawn McCoy. In fact, we saw none of him last week. But, Darwin Thompson doing very little as well. Which of those running backs would you prefer to play, or are you fine playing both of them?
Yeah, I think it's fine to play both of them, but I'd be much more likely to play Damian Williams. I don't think I'm really going to have much of any of Raheem Mostert, especially because I think he's going to be a more public play, and you can get so much leverage by, a Tevin Coleman vulture touchdown. Because it does, like you said, it looks pretty certain that he'll play. To what capacity? I don't know how much capacity you can play under, the conditions he's dealing with. These are some of the best athletes in the world, and he looked bad. He had to get carted off for an upper body injury. It took him forever to get off the field, but if he's going to play, it literally takes 1 touchdown to swing things. So I'd be looking to leverage what I think will be a pretty public Raheem Mostert coming off of a truly historic game. And Damian Williams is just that dude. He is so, I don't know if he's good or if he just plays for the Chiefs and that makes him good. I don't really care.
I'll go with that.
He still plays for the Chiefs. It doesn't matter. So, and he gets volume on the Chiefs, I guess, is what is the most important thing. Over the past 3 weeks, I believe Darwin Thompson has had 5 carries and 1 catch, and LaShawn McCoy can't be measured in touches. He can only be measured in either appearances or snaps, of which he has 1 single snap, did not get a touch in the past 3 weeks. He's just, he's done. I don't know if he'll even be active at this point. So, and if he's not active, that does kind of make Darwin Thompson interesting. But for the most part, Damian Williams, I'll probably have a lot of Damian Williams and very little of Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we'll probably, when we touch on the dart tosses or the guys not named, not quarterbacks, not Damian Williams or Raheem Mostert, and not the tight ends. I think we get into guys that are pretty much dart tosses. We can maybe include Thompson in there. Justin, do you prefer Damian Williams to Mostert at this point? Look, Matt Breida is there. If we see Coleman, are these things that concern you, or are you all in on this rushing attack for the 49ers?
I think it's an interesting story because Kyle Shanahan kind of dragged or, allured, gave Tevin Coleman, said, hey, come with me from Atlanta. It was time for Tevin Coleman to get paid. And there he went. And it's been cloudy, Jerick McKinnon, Matt Breida, now Raheem Mostert. It's been, somewhat of a committee, but there's been injuries and it's been a Breida week. Then Tevin Coleman a couple weeks ago against Minnesota did his thing, 22 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. So it was wow, there's the Tevin Coleman that the 49ers got. They got their guy, and then all of a sudden, boom, here's Raheem Mostert. And it would appear 31 touches against the Packers that it's his backfield. Of course, Tevin Coleman's a little dinged, but it looks, I think if everybody's healthy, it's probably going to be a committee just like 80% of the rest of the league. And that's just the nature of the business at this point. And to throw off defensive coordinators, you're probably going to want to have a little yin and yang and not, if they're game planning for Raheem Mostert, you're probably going to mix in some Tevin Coleman and some Matt Breida. As far as Damian Williams, Andy Reid said this offseason, Damian Williams is my guy. And it's a 27-year-old coming from the Dolphins, finished last season pretty strong. Was in fantasy circles. There was a lot of hype. We drafted him round 3 in this big end league that I consulted for, and I was kind of skeptical, and he did pretty much squat until since week 16. It was the Damian Williams that Andy Reid was talking about. We talk about Darwin Thompson. There were little high expectations early on with him. Now it's the Damian Williams that I think that the Chiefs wanted. And when you have that Damian Williams, now you're not one-dimensional like they have been at certain points in the season. So this is the guy that the Chiefs, that Andy Reid was talking about. I think Kyle's 100% right. It's Damian Williams in terms of my confidence level of any running back in this football game.
Yeah, I would, and I'm on board with that as well. I think Williams is the guy with the role and, the consistent production As you mentioned, since his return in Week 16, there have been lots of the touchdowns. And those are the things we like as fantasy owners. You'll be surprised to learn. So if we're looking, and I guess, I know, Justin has already gone Brent Musburger on me and talked about his boys in the desert. If we're looking at the over-under here, I mean, we're expecting some good scoring. So let's kind of look at the outliers, the guys not named Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. So I'm going to include, the usual assortment here, the Sammy Watkins, DeMarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman. We can go all the way down to, the backup tight ends in Kansas City. Look, Blake Bell might score a touchdown, right? I mean, it's possible. And Darwin Thompson included here, and the guys in San Francisco. We can go down to, I think everybody there in the receiving corps is a bit of an outlier in terms of the passing attack. So Emmanuel Sanders, Deebo Samuel, Kendrick Bourne. Kind of run through and let's go ahead and throw Breida in there, Kyle. Just kind of point me to the guys you're most interested in that group, or is it every single one of them?
Yeah, so I initially, when I saw the prices, McCole Hardman at 2,200 stood out. He ran more routes last week than DeMarcus Robinson for the first time since week 11, and I think that was a kind of an injury situation where he got more snaps. It wasn't game planned that way. It wasn't the game script. This week, or I guess last week, it was the idea is that McCole Hardman gets on the field more and is running more routes, but I think he's going to be everybody's favorite punt play, and are we that certain that he will he will score more points than DeMarcus Robinson? No, it's anybody's guess. I would put a lean on McCole Hardman because of what he did last week, and I think he's a better player. But based on the ownership alone, I think DeMarcus Robinson and probably even Sammy Watkins at a higher price to build a different roster are just significantly they're just good pivots off of what I think is going to be the very chalky play in Hardman. And it makes sense. Everybody talks about he's he's a tournament player. He's a guy who's built for high variance situations. But everybody knows that and everybody says that. It's sort of how this year we saw so many people not buying last week's explosion, they weren't buying the second week. DFS has gotten sharp, and I think it's to the point where he's just going to be over-owned relative to what we can project him. Kyle Juszczyk, if you think the San Francisco 49ers are going to be losing, is a great play. He's a guy who is on the field a ton and never gets involved unless they're in a close game or mostly just trailing, because that's what he does. He blocks and he catches passes. And he does both those things very well, and he doesn't run the ball at all. So if you think they're going to be down, which I do, I'd be betting the Chiefs in this game. I think they're going to win. They've got one of the best players I've ever seen. And surrounding them, I think, outside of that, San Francisco, Damian Williams, for sure. No, he's so good. He's so good. But no, I think having Patrick Mahomes is just such an edge that I'll take them with the points. But for that reason, I think Kyle Juszczyk is an awesome punt play, as well as a guy like Kendrick Bourne. I just think the ancillary passing pieces of a team that's going to be trailing a lot, that's where I want to target. So probably some Kyle Juszczyk, some Kendrick Bourne, and pivot off McCole Hardman.
And Justin, how do you feel about this big gaggle of outliers?
Yeah, people don't realize when you look at Kyle Juszczyk's number over the last 4 or 5 years, he's been a fantasy relevant person that nobody's heard of. 40, 50 receptions. Just one of these guys that's kind of kicked around a little bit. I'm not going there. I think that, there's been some disappointments as I look at this roster here. Dante Pettis, we had high expectations for, did not come into his own. When you look at McCole Hardman, I think that the Chiefs were kind of hedging at this in 2019. They drafted him. There was some uncertainty about Tyreek Hill and his status. When you look at these two guys, I think that they were looking to draft the next Tyreek Hill if they weren't going to see Tyreek Hill this season. Obviously because of his poor behavior. 5'10", they're both 5'10". He's fast. Nobody's faster than Tyreek Hill. So I think Hardman does have that upside. But with Tyreek Hill in the equation, McCole Hardman has been little to nothing. So now if you remove Tyreek Hill, it would be a certainly different story. Kendrick Bourne's kind of the same thing. We gravitate to Deebo Samuel and Emmanuel Sanders, and Bourne's that guy that'll grab a touchdown or 2 touchdowns and screw up your lineup. So I think Bourne is probably that guy. Emmanuel Sanders is another guy you look at. I know we're not going up that high, but I think there's a decision to be made whether you want to play Emmanuel Sanders on the 49ers, or do you want to play Deebo Samuel? And Sanders has been quiet, but as we've seen, not just talking about this season, but over the last 5 years, I mean, Emmanuel Sanders can show up as well as any wide receiver in the NFL. I'm a firm believer that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have to throw the ball more than 8 times. Emmanuel Sanders is that polished veteran wide receiver. I think he can turn it on whenever he wants. So I think he's a sneaky play that a lot of people are not going to. I mean, Samuel's probably going to be highly owned. I think Sanders can kind of go by the wayside and has those capabilities. And we've seen it. We saw it in New Orleans week 14. We saw it week 9 at the Cardinals. I mean, the guy he's an elite wide receiver in the NFL, and he's still doing it at an older age.
A rarity. Justin is not wrong. So I kind of agree with that, and I feel like all the wide receivers all the way up to Deebo and Sanders are pretty much outliers in this one, just given how much they've passed. And I would also agree with both you guys. I think they're going to have to pass more. They'll likely get out to an early lead, according to the last 2 games we've seen the Chiefs, and then they will quickly relinquish it.
What about Sammy Watkins? I mean, do you want to talk about Sammy? Because you have Richard Sherman, right? And he stays on one side of the field. We don't know. I mean, there's some, Darrelle Revis was like, he's not a lead. He doesn't follow and I agree. To be honest, I think that the top corner on a team, and by the way, PFF had Richard Sherman as I think the number 1 defensive player in the NFL this season, if I'm not mistaken, at least that corner, but maybe the whole NFL.
I don't know about the whole NFL, for sure number 1 corner though.
Why is he not capable of shadowing Tyreek Hill? And I think he's, a lot of corners.
Well, he doesn't shadow. That's why.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They play sides.
So where does that leave Sammy Watkins would be my question. I think that frees up Sammy Watkins. Bob, you and I have been pro Sammy Watkins. Feels like a decade because, again, I'm kind of like Emmanuel Sanders. He's not the wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders is, but any given week, I mean, there were points in this season where like Sammy Watkins is going to be a wide receiver 1, and then he turned into the Buffalo Bills Sammy Watkins.
I think there's reason to believe he shows up in this game. Some of the metrics on the deep balls in particular, Richard Sherman is not the best in the league on his side of the deep balls. He's 7th.
Right.
The rest of the defense, though, is like 21st against deep passes, especially 21st over the middle and 15th in the league to the right. So Pat Mahomes' deep ball is a big deal, and this just in, Sammy Watkins is pretty good at that portion of the game. So I do believe there's something to that, and ideally, I mean, I think all these guys, Watkins, Hardman, I would agree. I'd have him a little ahead of Robinson. But I think any of those guys are kind of, reasonable enough dart tosses because that's all we're making at that point. We're hoping for a guy. And I think the other thing that's a little encouraging there is Tyreek Hill is not drawing the true wide receiver 1 targets, right? I mean, some games he gets a lot, some games he doesn't. So
he hasn't gone over 100 yards in like 10 plus games, I believe, and he hasn't gone double-digit targets in the same amount of time. Like, it's been like nearly a season. I want to say it's closer to it's like 11 or 12. He has truly taken a back seat to Travis Kelce as the second receiving option.
I would agree. So I think those other guys are pretty viable plays as well. So let's just, before we bail out on this game and get ready to watch it, is there any reason to play defenses in this game, Kyle?
I would say yes. I do think it's pretty viable, especially because I don't think anybody's going to do it. I mean, I don't think it's going to be very popular. There are 470,000 entries in the big contest on DK. Someone's going to do it. But I will say, especially, I think there is some merit to getting really weird and running quarterback opposing defense because you're banking on getting a lot of play volume. I think it's very possible Patrick Mahomes gets sacked a few times and throws 1 turnover, especially if the 49ers get out to an early lead, which it seems like the Chiefs love letting their opponents do. It's the way that Jameis Winston needs to throw an interception to get fired up to start a game. The Chiefs apparently just need to let their opponents take a lead to get fired up. So I think there's a scenario in which just a lot of plays happen in this game. And when you have a lot of plays, a lot of dropbacks, that can lead to sacks, turnovers, touchdowns. It's what we saw with the Houston defense playing against Patrick Mahomes. Houston's defense was fine in terms of they got a handful of sacks. They obviously had the touchdown. And we saw it when the Kansas City Chiefs played the Rams last year, where they each had 8 touchdowns. I believe the Rams had 2. It was just crazy. When you get that many plays, weird things happen. I think it could lead you to a different construction. The only players I can blanket say I probably won't have any of are the kickers in this game, because I think there's going to be a lot of scoring, and kickers don't have access to splash plays or touchdowns. So when you get these very high scoring games, you just don't get ceiling games from kickers typically.
Right, and I would just remind everybody the 49ers have 48 sacks in 2019.
Yeah, they're also great defenses too.
Right, their front four, has 33 of those sacks. The Chiefs' offensive line, not necessarily their strength. So, Justin, how eager are you, or not, to play a defense in this one?
I think you can. I don't know that it's wise. I mean, look, it's Super Bowl Sunday, right? So there's jitters. Again, I'm looking at 20 optimal lineups right now from a credible website. And interestingly enough, I am seeing two kickers in a lot of these lineups, meaning Harrison Butker and Robbie Gould. So who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. We know that there could be a lot of points. We know that there's the best offense in the NFL. We know that there's the best defense in the NFL. Hey, for all we know, it could be a 24-10, 24-17 type of game, which would put kickers like Harrison Butker and Robbie Gould in your lineups. Now, are they going to drop Tyreek Hill numbers? Absolutely not. Can you squeeze 6, 8, 10 points out of both of them? You certainly can. A couple field goals, even say it was a shootout, 4 or 5 extra points. You're fine with Harrison Butker getting you 10, 11, 12 points. Robbie Gould, very similar numbers. So that's what I'm seeing right now. It's scary to think that that's where you got to go. But if you want Patrick Mahomes and you want the Kelce's of the world, or you want Tyreek Hill, and you might need to have a couple of these kickers. And the kickers, interestingly enough, I feel a little more secure about playing the kickers than I would playing the defenses in this football game.
I would agree in this regard. If you're playing Patrick Mahomes in the captain's seat, you're going to have to do some finagling to round out that lineup. So I don't know if I'm going to go that far. Justin, you mentioned having the jitters. So before we close out the show tonight, I want to ask you about a tweet, if everyone wants to go out to their Twitter devices and enter Tom Brady into the search queue. He vague posted. He tweeted a photograph. So Patriot Nation is up in arms. Justin, should they be? Is this just nothing? As Adam Schefter suggested, this is not about football, but it's a pretty cryptic post. How does Patriot Nation feel?
Adam Schefter, friend of the Football Diehards podcast. He was on a couple of years ago. Nice guy. But he said it was BS. I'm not buying that. I mean, Tom Brady, there's a level of semantics. We saw an Instagram post a couple of weeks ago. This is chess. This is business. This is saying, look, March is around the corner. I'm going to be a free agent. Pay me. There's a lot of speculation here that there's a marriage that could potentially be on the rocks. I'm not buying into that TMZ crap, but this is 2020 and divorces and separations occur. The biggest thing that I can take away from all this crap from being here is we know that there's quarterbacks in this league that are getting paid a lot of money that are far inferior to Tom Brady. And there has been no accommodation to Tom Brady, historically up until now. And the fact of the matter is he's made Foxborough, Mass, which was a dump for a lot of years, into this beautiful place where you can shop and go to the movies and eat sushi, not even need to watch the Super Bowl champs play. And that is because of number 12. So is he welcome at this point? I don't know that he is. And I think there's been some hard feelings with the Garoppolo going to the 49ers. He was your long-term investment. Bob Kraft wanted Tom Brady, your short-term investment. And Jimmy Garoppolo's in the Super Bowl now. And so I don't know. It's a business. It doesn't appear that there's a guy that's going to play if Tom Brady leaves and they're back to the 8-8 Patriots or the 7-9 Patriots. Look, I looked at the lines today from the DraftKings sports book, and the Patriots, for him to return to the Patriots, I think they're minus 335. Heavy favorites to return to the New England Patriots. And then following that, I think was the Chargers, the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts make a little bit of sense if you look at their offensive line and talent, but does Giselle and Tom want to live in Indianapolis? I don't think so. We're here in LA a lot, and Vegas and stuff. So I'm thinking that he retires or he returns. But tonight, it's like anywhere else. I mean, if you guys said to me, I don't want you to be on the podcast anymore, or I don't feel welcome, and we've all felt not welcome in certain places before, might be time to move on. And we've seen it with Peyton Manning. We saw it with Brett Favre, and we saw it with Joe Montana, who went on to play for the Chiefs, and he played pretty well. So it's business. Yeah. He's got a brand to pump, and it's going to be an interesting couple of months, that's for certain.
I think as Brand is centered there, I'll be, look, I've been doing this for over 25 years. Nothing shocks me, but things would surprise me. Tom Brady playing in another uniform would surprise me.
Yep.
By the way, Justin, about next week. No. But I will, look, and we will come back next week, all of us, and discuss the Super Bowl and the Combine and start preparing you for the offseason. But I just want to give Kyle's take on this one. Kyle, what's more likely? Tom Brady playing for another team not called the Patriots, or Baker Mayfield becoming that top 5 quarterback everyone drafted him to be this year?
What's more likely?
What's more likely?
Sweet Baker Mayfield. I'm drafting him where he went last time for the principle alone. Take him as a top 4 quarterback again.
Alex
Take him in the 6th round.
Take him to the promised land.
It's the off season, always a fun, intrigue-filled time. We'll go through all this, and there'll be lots of time for all the gossip, but we will get to it after the Super Bowl and as we head into the start of the Combine season, which, look, the NFL, I talk about this all the time. It's a 365-day-a-year reality show. We get out of the Super Bowl. We go to the Combine ends. We go to free agency ends. We go to the pre-draft hype. We get out of the draft. We go into the OTAs, the mini camps and OTAs, and that season begins. And we get about a week in July where we hope nobody goes to jail, and then it all starts in earnest and training camps begin. So there'll be no.
I got a question for you guys.
Go
real quick. And sorry to intervene. While I have a thought on my head, they bring in Alex Van Pelt. We're talking about Mayfield. Why are we seeing more and more of these recycled has-beens to be like somewhat of mentors? I mean,
I don't know that Alex Van Pelt is necessarily a recycled has-been. I mean, I think he's been around. We don't know how effective he has been or has not been because he's been with Cincinnati, and it's a more bound organization. Perhaps that he was the only thing keeping them from going totally defeated last year. Maybe there's that.
He did work with Aaron Rodgers.
Right. So I don't know. We'll see. I think, Kevin Stefanski is the story in Cleveland. Kyle can disabuse me of that notion if I'm incorrect, him being in the area. But this is about Stefanski, his offense, his ability to put together a staff. And I don't think Alex Van Pelt will be either a high profile coordinator or a guy talking to opponents in pregame warm-up saying he's got to get the hell out of there.
Nick Chubb. We know one thing. Nick Chubb's going to get the football at least 325 times next season, especially under Stefanski, I think. That's the direction. I mean, they're going to run the football.
Yeah. If he picked anything up from Gary Kubiak, it's the play action works and the zone blocking scheme works. So let's wrap this up, Kyle, and set a pleasant tone as we head into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, like Justin said, if we know one thing, Sammy Coates is going to crush the NFL, and
Patrick Mahomes is no good.
And Kyle Juszczyk is gonna probably catch, I'll say, 3 for 30 and be in the optimal lineup. So enjoy the Super Bowl.
He's an offensive weapon. Everyone knows that.
He's like a shorter, wider Tyreek Hill. I've always said it, and I'll continue to say it as it'll be on full display in the Super Bowl. So everybody enjoy the Super Bowl. Thanks for listening all year. We'll be back next week probably to recap the entire season, kind of give our thoughts on where we think fantasy and the NFL are headed.
We didn't do any picks. Who do you like?
The Chiefs are going to win. It's going to be the under.
There's the gambling mindset. We're old, Kyle. I mean, who do you like for a team? Do you like? The spread's what? We had a pick, or we had?
I said Chiefs win, and then I bet the under, and I'll take the Chiefs with the points too.
All right, I like that. I'm there too.
I'm going to be the outlier. I'm going to say San Francisco wins, but we all know that Patrick Mahomes is the X factor here, and he'll probably win it all by himself. So make my pick look stupid. But I do like the way the 49ers are playing along both lines, and I think we'll find out if that still matters like it did in the old days when I played the football.
Joey Bosa, baby. Rookie of the year.
Well,
There you
on
have
that
it.
note, everybody, we'll catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in.